and welcome. I'm Grindle, and happy Halloween. Growing up in Australia, we never really had Halloween. It has, over the last 5 years, slowly become a thing here, but throughout my entire youth, it never really was. And so, the only exposure I really had to Halloween was through the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror Halloween specials. And so, in recognition of this, I have made my top 13 Treehouse of Horror countdown. I do stress that this is my countdown. Humor is extremely subjective, and as I've mentioned, nostalgia is a factor here. On top of this, most of the episodes are references to other TV shows or movies, so if I've not seen them, or I don't like the show they're referencing, they're not going to rate very highly. If you want a more objective view on the top 13 Halloween Treehouse of Horror episodes, I suggest you look at their IMDb ratings, because that's more of the general opinion. Now that we've got that disclaimer out of the way, let's get on to the top 13 Treehouse of Horror specials. Mwahaha! That's my scary laugh.
Number 13! In spot number 13, we have Treehouse of Horror Season 6, making it Treehouse of Horror Episode 5. Consisting of the 3 segments, The Shining, The Shinning, Time and Punishment, and Nightmare Cafeteria, I would not be surprised if many people rate this one higher up on their list. And while it is at the bottom of my list, it should be remembered that there are 25 Treehouse of Horror episodes, so even 13 is still a pretty good spot to be at. The episode has some fantastic one-liners, and quite possibly the most gruesome segment of any of the episodes, Nightmare Cafeteria. I remember as a kid, this episode always grossed me out quite a lot. It is rightfully considered one of the classic Treehouse of Horror episodes, and so has won the 13th spot on my countdown. Number 12! In number 12 spot, we have Season 2's Treehouse of Horror, which is the first Treehouse of Horror, and they really did start it with a bang. The art style is absolutely fantastic in this episode, especially when it comes to the Raven, and it has Hungry Are the Damned, which is a Twilight Zone parody of How to Cook Humans, one of my absolute favourite Twilight Zone episodes. The only weak spot in this episode is the Scary House, which I really didn't enjoy that much. Still, regardless of this, it is still enough to get it in the number 12 spot of my countdown. Number 11! In the number 11 spot, we have Season 16's Treehouse of Horror Episode 15. It consists of the Ned Zone, 4 beheadings and a funeral, and In the Belly of the Boss. It has a fantastic Voyage parody, once again another Twilight Zone parody, which will always get plus points, although admittedly the Ned Zone is probably one of my least favourite Twilight Zone parodies, and 4 beheadings and a funeral, which brings The Simpsons into the 19th century in a Jack the Ripper parody. Number 10! In my number 10 spot, I have one that'll probably surprise a lot of people. This one is a recent one, and so does not spawn from nostalgia. Season 21's Treehouse of Horror Episode 20. It has a really enjoyable introduction to it, which is almost a segment of its own. And then it has the 3 segments, Dial M for Murder or press hash to return to main menu, Don't Have a Cow Mankind, and There's No Business Like Mo Business. Dial M for Murder is what prevented this episode from being any higher on the list, as, while enjoyable, it wasn't really anything to do with Halloween. Don't Have a Cow Mankind is an absolutely fantastic zombie parody, and just a thoroughly enjoyable segment, and There's No Business Like Mo Business is a musical horror segment that comes straight out of left field. It was utterly unexpected and thoroughly enjoyable. Number 9! In the number 9 rating, we're going back to old school. We have Season 3's Treehouse of Horror Episode 2. This episode's 3 segments is presented in the form of nightmares after the Simpsons eat too much candy. The first of which is Lisa's nightmare, which I believe to be the weakest of the 3, but is still extremely enjoyable. Most people would remember it as the Monkey Paw segment. Bart's Dream is a fantastic parody of the Twilight Zone episode It's a Good Life, complete with its own Rod Sterling-esque introduction.
Presented for your consideration, Springfield, an average little town with a not-so-average monster.
It manages to take humorous jabs at the Twilight Zone, while still paying it lovable homage.
And did I mention that the monster is a 10-year-old boy? Quite a twist, huh?
This is probably one of my favourite segments in any Treehouse of Horror episode. And Homer's Dream involves grave-digging, brain transplants, and robots. 3 things that you just cannot go wrong with on Halloween. There's definitely some nostalgia filtering into this rating, as I distinctly remember watching it on Halloween Day when I was much younger. However, the humour, script and art on this episode, nostalgia aside, is easily enough to give it a place on this list. Number 8! The number 8 position goes to Season 14's Treehouse of Horror Episode 13, which consists of the 3 segments, Send in the Clones, The Fright to Creep and Scare Harms, and The Island of Dr. Hibbert. I have very little to say about this episode, but I enjoyed it enough to put it at number 8, so that says something. Moving on. Number 7. In position number 7 we have Treehouse of Horror Season 15, which is the 14th Treehouse of Horror episode. It consists of Reaper Madness, which is pretty damn funny and very Halloween, Frankenstein, which is a parody of Frankenstein, although admittedly I just never really enjoyed it that much, and Stop the World, I Want to Goof Off, another fantastic Twilight Zone parody. If you haven't noticed yet, putting in a Twilight Zone parody is going to probably make it place on my list. The original Twilight Zone is one of my absolute favourite shows ever, so I make no apology for this. Number 6. In number 6 position we have another crowd shocker, Season 24's Treehouse of Horror Episode 23. This episode once again starts off with an amazing introduction which could have been a segment of its own. It then goes into the 3 segments, The Greatest Story Ever Hold, Unnormal Activity, and Bart and Homer's Excellent Adventure. As this was first aired in 2012, making reference to the Mayan calendar in the opening segment, and making reference to the Large Hadron Collider was a really fun thing to do. It did play on some people's actual fears, and for the rest of us, it was just good fun to see those fears played out on The Simpsons. The second segment, Unnormal Activity, does a great job of parodying Paranormal Activity, which is perhaps one of the most recognisable recent horror films. And regardless of whether you find it scary or not, you have to admit it was definitely ripe for the parodying. And the final segment, Bart and Homer's Excellent Adventure, despite obviously taking its name from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, is a Back to the Future parody. Now you might be thinking, wait Grim, what does Back to the Future have to do with Halloween? Well, absolutely nothing, but I'm a hypocrite, so deal with it. Number 5! In the number 5 spot we have Season 5's Treehouse of Horror Episode 4. This episode consists of the 3 segments, The Devil and Homer Simpson, which famously puts Ned Flanders as the Devil, which was comic genius in my opinion, Terror at 5.5 Feet, which is another Twilight Zone parody, you know the one, with William Shatner in it, where he sees the gremlin. What's it called? Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. And Bart Simpson's Dracula, which is, I guess, sort of a parody of Bram Stoker's Dracula, but it's mainly just a vampire story. But a thoroughly enjoyable vampire story. It also has a pretty great parody of Charlie Brown's Christmas special, which is completely comically out of place at the end of the episode. Number 4! Very fittingly, in the number 4 position, we have Season 4's Treehouse of Horror Episode 3. It consists of the 3 segments, Clown Without Pity, which is surprise surprise, another Twilight Zone parody, this time of Living Doll, King Homer, which is a King Kong parody, and Dial Z for Zombies, which is another zombie parody, except this time it's the dead rising, rather than an infection making zombies. This episode has some of the most fantastic one-liners, not only in any Treehouse of Horror episode, but in any Simpsons episode.
What do you think, Smithers?
I think women and semen don't mix.
We know what you think.
And what with Dial Z for Zombies, we have enough gore to satisfy any Halloween bloodlust. Number 3! Going home with the bronze medal in 3rd place, we have Season 10's Treehouse of Horror Episode 9. The episode consists of Hell to Pay, Terror of Tiny Toon, and Starship Poopers. Starship Poopers is admittedly not one of my favourite segments, but Hell to Pay and Terror of Tiny Toon really make it for me in this episode. The idea of cartoon characters coming alive and killing you is a funny one. Well, a funny and terrifying one, which makes it great for Halloween. And the fact that the characters they're killing is also cartoon characters adds an entire another level of irony to it. And Hell to Pay has always been one of my favourite Treehouse segments. I think it's parodying something, but if it is, I don't know what it is and probably haven't seen it. But it manages to stand on its own 2 legs just fine because I enjoy it nonetheless. Number 2. Going home with silver today in 2nd place, we have Season 17's Treehouse of Horror Episode 16. It has a very enjoyable opening scene, and the 3 segments B.I. Bartificial Intelligence, which is a pretty funny parody of a film I've not seen, Survival of the Fattest, which is also pretty great, and I've grown a costume to your face, which, if Wikipedia is anything to go by, is apparently a parody of The Mask, the classic Twilight Zone episode, except it doesn't really have anything to do with the masks. It doesn't have anything to do with it at all, in feeling-wise, or story-wise, or art-wise, so I'm not really sure if it is supposed to be a parody of The Mask, or if someone just wrongly diagnosed it as such. Personally, when I watched it, I thought it was a parody of that episode of Buffy. You know, the one that has practically the exact same storyline as the episode. And as a parody of the episode of Buffy, it's fantastic. If it's a parody of The Mask, however, it's a very badly done parody. And if it's a parody of nothing, well, it's a great standalone segment. Either way, it was very enjoyable, regardless of whether they failed to do a good parody or succeeded in doing a good parody. Or didn't even attempt to do a parody at all.
I'm Jared from the Subway ads. I'm only a little overweight and sexually ambiguous.
Oof. That joke did not age well. Number 1. And taking gold place in the number 1 position is Treehouse of Horror Episode 6 from Season 7. This episode just manages to tick all the boxes. It parodies some 1950s sci-fi with Attack of the 50-Foot Eyesore, a parody of Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. It gives us a slasher film parody with Nightmare on Evergreen Terrace, which is easily one of the best Treehouse segments, and has not only my favourite line from any Treehouse segment, but my favourite line from any Simpson episode ever.
Do not touch Willie. Good advice.
And the third segment, Homer Cubed, which is my favourite Twilight Zone parody The Simpson delivers of one of my favourite Twilight Zone episodes ever. The episode is full of great art, great references, great scripts, and hits me with a wave of nostalgia, and so it takes out my number 1 place in my top 13 Treehouse of Horror Simpsons Halloween specials. If you've somehow managed to come across this video, and have also somehow managed to get this far into the video, and have a different opinion to myself, please leave it in the comments, or just yell it at the screen. Either way, I'd love to hear your opinion.
Handsome devil. We're back. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a happy Halloween and eat enough candy to give you enough cavities to last a lifetime. I have been, and still am, Grim Grindle.